The Library Beneath the Ivy by Enchanted Tales Hub. Chapter 5. The light came softly. It filtered through the round window in Eliza's room, turning the air golden and catching dust motes midriff. Outside, the garden was already humming, bees at work, a bird calling from the roof, the hush of leaves shifting in the breeze. Eliza stirred beneath the quilt. For a moment, she didn't move. The kind of stillness that comes after something has changed, when the world is the same, but you are not. Then she sat up. The green notebook still sat on the desk, its cloth cover warmed by the morning sun. She reached for it without opening it, fingers running lightly over the fabric. Downstairs, the smell of toast drifted up the stairwell. Not burned, for once, Agnes must have been paying attention this time. Eliza patted down barefoot. The kitchen was quiet, but not in the way it had been when she first arrived. It felt used. Now a teacup drying by the sink, a knife with crumbs left beside a jar of honey. Agnes stood at the counter, back turned. She didn't look up when Eliza entered, just spoke softly, like the kind of person who doesn't rush morning words. Toast or porridge? Eliza slid into her seat. Toast, she said. Then, after a pause, thank you. Agnes nodded. A few quiet minutes passed, butter spreading, kettle warming. Then Agnes placed a plate in front of her and sat down across the table with her own. The silence between them wasn't tense, just full, like something waiting its turn to be spoken. Eliza took a bite, chewed slowly. Eliza looked at her aunt for a moment, then glanced away. I found something, she said at last, her voice low but steady. Agnes's fingers stilled on her mug. She murmured. I wondered. Eliza hesitated, then added, it wasn't what I expected. A small smile touched the corners of Agnes's mouth. Not quite happy, not quite sad. The wind shifted, lifting the edge of the curtain. Silence settled again, but this time it felt like a thread, not one that bound, but one that connected. Light, fragile, waiting. Eliza didn't press. She didn't need to. Not yet. She reached for another slice of toast, her fingers brushing a ring of sunlight on the table. And across from her, Agnes lifted her mug, holding it steady, like someone waiting for the next page to turn, but willing to wait a little longer. Eliza placed her mug down gently. I went through the ivy, she said, voice low but steady. Agnes stilled, not with surprise, but with recognition. A long pause passed. Eliza continued. There's a door, hidden behind the vines. I found it 2 nights ago. Agnes didn't speak. There's a library behind it, Eliza added. Books that whisper, some that let you step inside. I didn't understand at first, but she trailed off, watching Agnes's face. Her aunt's gaze was fixed on the grain of the table. Then, after a long moment, she said, I know. Not a confession, not an admission, just a truth long carried. Eliza studied her. You closed it. Agnes nodded. Once. I did. the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was the sound of something old being unburied. Agnes's fingers traced the rim of her mug. She didn't look at Eliza as she spoke, not yet. But her voice was clear, quiet, and laced with something fragile. After the accident, after your parents were gone, everything inside me shattered. There were pieces I couldn't hold. She paused. The house, the garden, the books, they remembered. I couldn't be here and not feel it all pressing in. So I closed the door. I locked it all behind the ivy, and I left. Eliza didn't speak. She only listened, not trying to fill the silence, just letting it live between them. Agnes went on. Years later, I came back. I thought time had dulled it, but the library was still there, still waiting. And I was still afraid. She looked up at last. Until you. The green notebook sat between them. Agnes glanced at it, then reached out and rested her fingertips lightly on the cover. You opened it. Eliza nodded. There's a book with my name, and there's one with yours. Agnes gave the faintest of smiles, not happy, not sad, but accepting. We all leave pieces of ourselves in that place, some without meaning to. I want to understand, Eliza said. Not just what happened, but why. Why the forgetting? Why the fear? Why the stories were locked away? Agnes hesitated, then reached over and gently pushed the notebook toward her. Then we begin, she said, but not all at once. I know, Eliza whispered. One page at a time. Agnes stood. Finish your tea. When you're ready, I'll come with you. Eliza watched her go, footsteps soft against the wooden floor. She looked down at the notebook. The green cloth caught the morning light, and for the first time, she didn't feel like she was holding someone else's secrets. She was holding the beginning of something they would face together. Chapter 6. Eliza lingered at the table long after Agnes had gone. The silence of the kitchen settled like a shawl around her shoulders, not heavy, not cold, just present. The kind that only comes after something has been spoken aloud. She reached for the green notebook, drawing it toward her slowly. The cover was soft beneath her fingertips. Not magic now, not mysterious, just familiar. Like the worn edge of a beloved book or the hush of a place you've returned to more than once. She opened it to a fresh page. There, in a gentle script that was not her own, an entry waited. You are not alone in what you carry. She stared at it a moment. The ink had faded slightly, as if it had been written a long time ago and only now remembered. Then, carefully, Eliza picked up the pen that Agnes had left by the windowsill. She didn't know exactly what she wanted to say, only that something inside her needed to speak. And that for once, it might be safe to let the words come. She wrote, Today I heard the truth in my aunt's voice, and it didn't sound like breaking. It sounded like a door unlocking slowly. I think the stories are waiting for us, not a haunt, but to hold. She paused, then added, and I'm not afraid to listen. The pen hovered for a moment longer. Then she closed the notebook gently, as if not to wake something sleeping. The morning sun had climbed higher now, spilling across the table. And somewhere just beyond the ivy wall, the library waited, quieter than before. But not empty. Eliza stood. It was time. They walked through the garden without speaking. The path was soft beneath their feet, half shadowed by swaying branches. Petals drifted from the wild rosebush, catching in the folds of Agnes's shawl. Eliza brushed one from her sleeve, then let her fingers trail across the tops of the lavender as they passed. The air smelled of green things and something older, damp stone, fallen apples, time. Agnes carried the notebook in the crook of one arm. She hadn't said much since they'd left the kitchen, but her steps were steady. Eliza walked beside her, not leading this time, not following either. The ivy wall came into view, tall and still, the leaves murmuring in the breeze. They stopped just before it. Agnes stood very still. Eliza looked up at the place where the door was hidden. In the daylight, it almost vanished again, the outlines blurred into leaf and shadow, as if the garden itself had tried to forget it. Agnes spoke first, her voice low. "It's strange. I used to imagine it crumbling away on its own. That maybe, if I waited long enough, the past would dissolve like old paper." Eliza glanced at her, but it didn't. Agnes gave a small, wry smile. Not bitter, just honest. No, it only grew quieter and heavier. A breeze stirred the ivy, and for a moment it whispered around them like a curtain shifting. Eliza stepped forward, placing her hand gently against the hidden seam. "Are you ready?" she asked, not turning. There was a pause. Then Agnes answered, soft but sure, "No. But I'm going anyway." Eliza smiled faintly. "Me too." Together, they reached for the door. The door gave way with the faintest sigh, as if it had known they were coming. Ivy brushed their shoulders as they stepped through, then closed behind them, not shutting them in, but shielding them like the turning of a page. The cool breath of the stairwell rose to meet them. Agnes hesitated at the top step, her hand resting on the stone wall. Eliza glanced back, offering no words, only presence. Then Agnes stepped down. The spiral staircase wound gently, just as it had before, lanterns flickering awake in their sconces one by one, casting a golden hush across the stone. The air smelled of old ink and moss, of candle wax and distant rain. And then they reached the bottom. The library unfolded before them like a dream pressed carefully between pages. Tall shelves rose in every direction, curving and shifting with impossible geometry. Balconies looped through the air, ladders slid on their own, and a glass dome high above showed nothing but stars. Even the morning light still touched the world above. Agnes drew in a breath, quiet but sharp. "It's just as I left it," she whispered. And not at all. They stepped forward together. Books hummed gently on the shelves, some shivering at the edge of memory. Others turned their spines toward them, curious. A few whispered half-formed words as they passed. And then, as if it knew, the book with Agnes's name eased forward from its place on the shelf. Eliza looked to her, unsure. But Agnes didn't reach for it. Not yet. Instead, she turned her head and looked toward a distant wing of the library, one Eliza hadn't explored yet. It shimmered faintly at the edges, as if wrapped in mist. "There are more rooms," Agnes said softly. "I never dared go farther. I always thought this was all I could bear." Eliza turned toward the wing, curiosity sparking. "Do you want to see?" Agnes hesitated. "I don't know." Eliza smiled, just a little. "We don't have to go far." "No," Agnes said, gaze still distant. "Just far enough." "Yes, let's go." Eliza stepped toward the misted wing. The light changed as she crossed the threshold, not darker, not brighter, but thicker, like walking into a place where the air itself held memory. Dust motes shimmered, suspended like stars. The hush here was deeper than silence. It was waiting. Behind her, she heard the soft rhythm of Agnes's steps, slower now, but steady. The shelves in this wing were older. Their wood was gnarled, as if the trees they came from had once heard too many stories and had bent beneath their weight. The spines of the books here bore no titles, only small symbols, a thread, a clock, a seed, a flame. One shelf caught Eliza's eye. A book, pale blue with no markings, was glowing faintly. She reached for it. The moment her fingers brushed the cover, it warmed not hot, but familiar, like sunlight remembered through a window. She looked to Agnes for permission, but her aunt only gave a small nod. So she opened it. A rush of golden light spilled out, swirling around them both. And then Eliza was standing in a kitchen. It wasn't hers. It wasn't Agnes's. It was somewhere before. The wallpaper was faded yellow, and the floor creaked. A kettle whistled on the stove. And seated at the table was a girl no older than Eliza, scribbling in a notebook. Across from her sat a young woman with soft eyes and a worn cardigan. Agnes. Younger. Laughing. Whole. She looked at the girl as if she were the most important story in the world. And Eliza knew, without being told, that the child at the table was her mother. The image held for only a moment. Then it dissolved like steam on glass. Eliza blinked, and the library returned around her. The blue book in her hands was now still, quiet again. Agnes hadn't spoken. Tears welled gently in the older woman's eyes, but she didn't look away. Eliza reached out and placed the book back on the shelf. Her fingers lingered on the spine, a gesture of thanks. "They were happy," she said softly. Agnes nodded. "For a while, yes." The mist shifted around them, revealing more shelves, more symbols, more waiting. Eliza looked at her aunt, eyes steady. "We can find more. When you're ready." Agnes's voice was almost a whisper. "I think I'm ready to remember who I was." Before the silence, Eliza reached for her hand. "Then let's keep going." They came back to the shelf in silence. The book with Agnes's name still waited there, slightly ajar. Its spine no longer shimmered, but there was a quiet weight to it, like the pause before a story begins again. Agnes stood very still. Eliza didn't speak. She only rested a hand lightly on her aunt's shoulder. Agnes drew in a breath, then reached out. Her fingers trembled as she pulled the book down. It felt heavier than she remembered. Together, they sat on the low velvet bench nearby, the book resting across both their laps. Agnes opened the cover. Pages flipped like wind playing with falling leaves. Finally stopped at blank page. No one spoke for a while. Agnes held the book with both hands now. Her voice, when it came, was quieter than before. Your mother and I found this place together when we were just about your age. We thought it was magic, and it was beautiful and strange and full of wonder. But we didn't understand the cost. She turned to Eliza. One summer, she opened a book that didn't belong to her, a memory not hers to carry, and it stuck like a shadow she couldn't shake. She began to change. She grew afraid, distracted, haunted. Eliza leaned forward, listening with every part of herself. Agnes went on. You were just a toddler when I realized how deep it had gone. She'd wander through the house at night, murmuring fragments from other people's lives, crying without knowing why. I couldn't reach her. And the stories, they stopped being wonder. They became wounds. She looked down. So I made a choice. I sealed the door. I took the book she opened, the one that hurt her, and buried it. I thought if I locked this place away, her mind might quiet. Her heart might heal. Her voice thickened. And I asked her to leave. I sent her, and you, far from here, far from the memories that broke her. I told myself it was to protect you, to give you a life untouched by what this place could do. Eliza sat very still. But it didn't work, did it? Agnes shook her head. No. Even sealed, the memory clung to her. And I carried the guilt. I was afraid that if you ever came back, if you opened a book, it would all happen again. That I'd lose you too. Eliza reached over and took her hand. But you didn't lose me. I'm still here, and I'm not afraid. A long silence settled between them. Then Agnes looked up. Neither am I. She opened the book again, and the page that waited for them was blank, not empty, but ready. Together, they looked down into it, and the library exhaled, as if relieved to finally let the truth breathe. The morning after they returned from the library, the cottage felt different, lighter. Birdsong came through the windows, and the air smelled faintly of chamomile and thyme. Agnes moved quietly through the kitchen, setting out mugs, buttering toast, boiling the kettle like she had every morning, only this time with a steadier hand. Eliza sat at the table, turning a pencil between her fingers. The green notebook lay open beside her, a fresh page waiting. There was a knock at the door. Agnes paused. When she opened it, the morning light fell gently on the figure standing there, travel-worn, quiet-eyed, holding a small satchel in one hand. It was Eliza's mother. For a moment, neither sister spoke. Then, you kept the ivy trimmed, her mother said softly, almost like a peace offering. Agnes's mouth twitched, nearly a smile. Tried to. It always comes back. A breath of silence passed. Not heavy this time, just old. Familiar. Then Eliza's mother stepped forward, and they embraced, not tightly, not dramatically, but long enough. When they parted, she glanced past Agnes into the cottage. "She's taller," Agnes said, smiling faintly. "So much like you." Eliza's mother chuckled. "And braver than both of us." Eliza's mother stepped inside. Her eyes moved around the space, the kitchen table, the worn kettle, the wide window with lace curtains, and something settled in her shoulders. "I wasn't sure I'd ever come back here," she said quietly. "Neither was I," Agnes said. "But I think I'm ready now to stop running from old pages." She glanced at Eliza, who watched from the table, then back at her sister Agnes. "I've been writing again. Not the past, just small things. Mornings, meals, walks with Eliza and her father. And now," her voice softened, "I'd like to write something with you, too. If you'd let me." Agnes didn't speak for a moment. Then she stepped aside, gesturing toward the table. "We've saved a page for you." Eliza smiled and scooted over as her mother came to sit beside her. The three of them gathered at a small wooden table, with the notebook open like a doorway. Agnes picked up the pencil, then passed it to her sister. "What do we call this chapter?" she asked. Her sister looked at Eliza and smiled. "Home." Later that evening, as the sun slipped behind the hills and the cottage sank into a hush of orange and lavender light, Eliza found herself once more at the edge of the garden. The ivy wall stood where it always had, thick with curling green. But now the leaves looked softer somehow, less like a curtain, more like a veil. She stepped close and ran her fingers along the stones. The little mechanism was still there, half hidden. She knew where to find it now, but this time she didn't press it. She only stood there. Behind her, the windows of the cottage glowed with lamplight. Inside, Agnes and her mother sat shoulder to shoulder, a pot of tea between them, the green notebook open on the table. For the first time, Eliza didn't feel torn between the worlds. She turned back to the ivy, whispered, "Thank you," to the wall, to the library, to the stories, the ones that hurt, the ones that healed, and the ones yet to be told. She reached up and tucked a sprig of ivy behind a loose stone, gently, like placing a bookmark. Then she turned and walked back toward the cottage, toward warm light, soft voices, and the promise of a blank page.